Welcome to Accessibility and Universal Design Connection with DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. My name is Dr. Kathy Schmidt-Whitaker, and I'm Senior Accessibility Partnership Consultant. My colleague.
Hi, I'm Sue Cullen. Excuse me, I'm Sue Cullen, the Director of Universal Design and ICT Accessibility at Tech for All.
And hi, I'm Elaine Ober, the Director of Universal Design. The Director of Accessibility Consulting Programs at Tech for All.
We're with Tech for All, or TFA, specializing in accessible technology and universal design across environments, with clients from various industries. I'd like to share with you a personal story. A couple of years ago, I was working with an organization, and we were invited to participate in a DEI activity training. As a person with a disability, being legally blind, I asked for accessibility. The trainer called me and said there would be an activity. The activity would include looking at the slides, one about every 30 seconds, for about 20 of them. And at that point in time, people would raise their right hand to say they agree, or their left hand to say they disagree. Now, if you're like me, you might be thinking, wow, there's multiple layers of accessibility issues here, isn't there? And they really intentionally wanted to be very inclusive. However, they had never really had anyone ask for that type of interaction and accessibility before. So it became a learning opportunity. And today, we'd like to share this presentation as a learning opportunity of how to integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, with accessibility. Our agenda includes creating common understanding across terms, looking at current perspectives of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility, share non-inclusive and inclusive examples, and provide questions and responses as time permits. After the conference, we will post our slides. Understanding that we all have diverse experiences, levels of knowledge, variety of definitions, and meanings of terms are out there. We want to share some of the examples of common approaches that guides this presentation today. A definition for accessibility with the spirit of the broadest inclusion possible, condensed from the regulations, Part 36, on non-discrimination and public accommodations within commercial facilities will be utilized. A person with a disability can acquire the same information and engage in the same interactions and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally effective and integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. We acknowledge that the term DEI is in flux without a common approach in including accessibility. Some are adding it to the end, and others are integrating accessibility into DEI itself. Thus, we have two examples here that demonstrate this flux. The Government Accountability Office, or GAO, indicates that diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA, as the nation's largest employer, the federal government strives to be a model for diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility according to Executive Order 14035, to cultivate a workforce that draws from the whole diversity of the nation. We have our second example of DEI, and this is from Blue Cross Blue Shield from Rhode Island. We appreciate and celebrate everything that makes us who we are, fostering a work environment everybody feels a sense of belongingness and is empowered to succeed, regardless of age, color, national origin, citizenship, status, physical or mental disability, race, religion, creed, gender, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, and/or expression. So let's now turn our attention to universal design.
Universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. There are many definitions out there. We're using this one just as an illustration as we move forward and take a view at different examples we're going to look at. Inclusive design is the process to proactively, it creates strategies, it looks at workflows, policies, products, and services that enable the full range of human diversity. It considers ability, gender, age, language, race, culture, economic situation, geographic location, and other differences throughout the design journey. And as we move through this discussion, inclusive design is, I'd say, a broader range, demonstrating more what we mean when we say things should just be accessible and usable to everyone. So as we look at a few things, and including the three of us here, if we look at common inclusive design experience, something probably all of us have done is print a document. So when you think about it, some of you might be visual processors, and on your computer you might go to File in the toolbar, select Print, and then look for that little icon that looks like a tiny printer. So the printer icon, and I tend to process visually, so I tend to look at it that way. And Kathy, how do you look at when you're trying to talk about printing something?
Oh, totally. The Control P for print keystroke shortcut is the most efficient way to do it.
It's a very tactile interface with the keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I rely on the printer icon on the toolbar because I'm a much more visual person than auditory or tactile.
So even when you're working in groups and you start talking about something that simple, you have to take into account all of the different ways we look at even the simplest of tasks.
So as we're using our printing a document example, there are multiple ways of doing the same thing that illuminate options and opportunities, like peeling back the layer of an onion. Let's go more in depth within the perspectives of inclusive design within an organization. These two perspectives are strategic and operational. I'll be sharing the concepts or the scaffolding of these concepts, and then my colleagues will be providing examples within this framework. From a strategic standpoint, it's important to have the executive leadership involved and exposed within the accessibility and DEI efforts so that they are able to make informed decisions of how to integrate the areas. Inclusive counsel can be very advantageous if it's including accessibility and DEI efforts in regard to providing assistance at the strategic planning and policies and development and guidance within the organization, and reporting to the top leadership as well. And with an intentional paradigm shift, it's thinking from accommodating to including people with disabilities is important within that DEI perspective as well. And to integrate accessibility into the efforts and the DEI efforts into the accessibility efforts, so that there is a variety of differences within the discussions that occur that leads to a greater, richer, more diverse understanding and cultural environment. From an operational perspective, that means what we do in the action that can be taken. looking at the commitment statement for an organization, workforce initiatives, training topics and ways that that's incorporated, and small business reengineering. Elaine, please start us off with some examples from our clients.
So the connection between DEI and accessibility lies along a spectrum, and every organization is different. We work with such a broad array of clients that we see all sorts of approaches to this. In some organizations, DEI and accessibility are totally separate. This means that the DEI and accessibility officers are not at all involved in each other's efforts. Any kind of awareness or accessibility or DEI training are separate. So a first action to bring them together might be to include all common material in both trainings. And of course, the overall goal is to incorporate all aspects of diversity into one training going forward. Of course, other implications of this scenario are that disability and accessibility are not really discussed in DEI activities or sometimes even by the DEI staff. If there's a DEI council, it likely doesn't include anyone from the accessibility team. So in this scenario, where DEI is very much present, accessibility efforts are very much grassroots. Any accessibility budgets likely cover projects, mostly customer-facing, but not internal systems or employee training or even recruitment efforts. Towards the other end of the spectrum, there's significant overlap between DEI and accessibility initiatives. The DEI and accessibility leads work closely together. Trainings incorporate all aspects of diversity, including accessibility. Budgets, however, usually remain separate, and that's because accessibility covers a wider variety of work, including significant customer-focused activities, whereas DEI focuses on internal activities and systems and recruitment. Of course, there are different permutations and combinations of these. These are just sort of an amalgam of a variety of scenarios that we've observed over the years. So the second one is obviously a more holistic approach, and it's got a lot of benefits. For one thing, accessibility people learn about DEI beyond accessibility, and they, in turn, can teach the broader organization and the DEI staff about accessibility and its role in DEI. So there's one more piece of this puzzle that we haven't brought up yet, and it's seen in both scenarios. That's the Employee Resource Group, or ERG. Just quickly, and I think I can kind of see out there, by a show of hands or calling out, let us know if you're familiar with or are part of an ERG at your organization. Okay, I see a good number of hands. Any call-outs? Okay, so yeah, maybe about 15. That's pretty good. ERGs are voluntary employee-led groups that are aimed at fostering a diverse and inclusive workplace. They're usually led and comprised of employees who share a characteristic, such as gender, sexual orientation, disability, and a whole lot of others. A disability ERG can be a powerful partner for an accessibility team, especially when accessibility does not overlap with DEI. The optics of senior management funding ERG activities are very good, whereas funding an accessibility initiative may be fine for project work, but they probably don't get any budget for training or holding events.
And Elaine, before we move on, some of our clients, they're not only sharing training opportunities, attending each other's trainings, but they'll take the recordings of those and carve out snippets that they can then incorporate into the future trainings. And then, of course, they make these available to their staff and teams, you know, in their shared file system.
Thank you. So now we're going to explore a few non-inclusive and more inclusive examples of things you might encounter in your workplace. We're going to start at a very basic level with an accessibility statement, because that's something that every organization really needs to have. So here's our first one. Company X is committed to making our offerings accessible to people with disabilities. Our ongoing accessibility effort works towards conforming to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 AA. We welcome your accessibility feedback. For further assistance, please contact us at access@companyx.com. How inclusive does this statement sound? Say again? Oh, okay. Anything you can see, hear, or see is missing?
We'll get the mic to you in a second.
Hold on a second.
So Alex is bringing the mic.
It's equating accessibility with conformance to a standard. When you can't get accessibility simply by doing that.
So it's including the accessibility to standards, but it's not as inclusive as it could be.
Right.
That's right.
And perhaps not, and we recognize the fact that the standards are changing. So when we work with clients, we talk about WCAG 2.1 or current, that kind of thing.
And in addition, they only list one way to contact the company, and that's by email. So what would a more inclusive statement look like? Well, it would focus on usability for all, including users with disabilities. It would adopt WCAG 2.1 or whatever is the latest version, which would be a broader and more current standard. And it might provide more than one method of contacting the company.
Absolutely.
So let's look at a slightly more inclusive example. Company X is committed to making our offerings accessible to all, including people with disabilities. We are continually improving the user experience for everyone by applying the relevant accessibility standards. Our ongoing accessibility effort works towards conforming to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA. We welcome your feedback and want to meet your accessibility needs. For further assistance, please contact us at access@companyx.com or call us at the phone number provided here. We aim to respond in a timely manner. So here we see the difference between something that's really very just disability focused and here much more diversely focused on all people, all abilities.
We could even improve this statement if we had it, if your institution has an online form where you could go in and you could put your name and what the issue is, what the barrier is, and seek assistance that way. I'm sure some of you have those.
So now I'm going to turn it back to Kathy, who will take you through a few more examples.
So if we now turn to a more DEI-related activity example. A DEI activity that you may be asked to participate in would be asked who is in your professional circle of influence. This is an excerpt of an activity where we'd like for you to think about your circle of influence. Who do you seek out for advice and input? With whom do you collaborate more or consider when putting together a project team? How similar or different are you from them? This next slide shows a table of the characteristics to consider when answering the questions. How different or similar are you from those that you seek input from and those who you may ask to contribute to a project? The characteristics of this would include age group, gender, physical ability, race/ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. Now, focusing on accessibility, how inclusive is this list of characteristics? Could I have one or two from the audience?
Well, you need people with different disabilities on the team, right, to help out with their perspective.
Yes. And you may want people with a variety of disabilities beyond physical. Right.
And there was
Another
another
thought?
hand in the back and then directly behind as well. So whichever one you want to do first. Raise your hands again. In the back, right? Second to last row. It's a little hard to see with the lights.
I was also going to say that it doesn't include any other kind of disability besides physical abilities. And I also noticed it doesn't include like cultural or geographic, like people from different countries or even different areas within our country.
Yes, it's very limited, and it is not including the whole inclusive spectrum, as well. Was there a third?
I think
Or is that all?
that was all of them.
Okay.
And then also, did we mention the columns that it's who you seek out input from, advice from, and then the contribution to the project. So maybe that could be the role of that person. And I know Kathy's going to move forward and take us into an improved version.
Well, and so the areas that we that just tentatively we could identify to make it more improved is to multiple physical and invisible disabilities. And then also greater social cultural identities as well. So our more inclusive characteristic list, in addition to what was previously mentioned, could include cognitive functioning, computer literacy, education level, expertise, marital family status, national origin, political view, religion, and many others. Expertise, literacy, computer literacy, and others may lend but to bias based upon assumptions about ability. So it may not always be the outwardly physical and visible disabilities, it can also be other characteristics that can have impact and assumption as well. So we'd like to look at another example now, and this has to do with the idea of artificial intelligence and within the video interviewing hiring process. It's a trend that's begun, and we'd like to take a little excerpt from some guidelines as a basis for this example. So an excerpt from longer guidelines may include the following criteria to be evaluated to identify which applicants may be moving to the next stage in the interview process. 1, applicant will record a video response to interview questions within 15 minutes. 2, voice analysis and natural language processing, or NLP technologies, used to evaluate applicant skills and abilities. Analysis is available in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. And 3, applicant will play an interactive game to measure relevant skills and abilities to reduce bias. Now, how inclusive does this sound? Any thoughts from the audience?
We have one in the back.
It's not really accessible at all and inclusive. You just start with number 1, they may not have a video camera, they may not have access. 15 minutes to answer a question may not work for everybody. And the languages available is such a small fraction of what's available in the world. I'll leave it with that. There's so many more there.
Yes, thank you for those insightful offers, and definitely true, and there are others as well.
I think we had one midway
Okay.
on your left. Now on your right. Did you want to raise your hand again? Oh, was there?
Okay. I'm sorry, is there another one or no?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, from what you've shared and the algorithms, artificial intelligence, and disability discrimination and hiring document put out by the U.S. Department of Justice and Equal Opportunity Commission in May 2022, we have identified a couple of barriers that would help it become a little bit more inclusive. One, examine hiring technologies and during use to make sure that they're not screening out individuals with disabilities who can perform the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodations. Allow applicants to have a time to complete the interview process. Provide multiple ways to assess an applicant's skills and abilities and not just one way. Ensure that games and tests measure relevant skills and abilities and not challenge them to see how good they are at working workarounds and trying to figure out how to make it more accessible. And describe enough information about the process activity for the applicant to determine whether they ought to request a reasonable accommodation, and to provide the process as well as the contact information along with the instructions. So a more inclusive, while not completely inclusive, we want to point out, but a more inclusive for us to get thinking example. The following criteria will be evaluated with human oversight to decide which applicants will advance to the next stage of the hiring process. 1, applicant will record a video response to 9 interview questions. So very specific in terms of the number of questions that they have and no time limit. 2, voice analysis and natural language processing technologies will be one of several ways to assess an applicant's skills and abilities. Analysis is available in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and sign language. 3, applicant will play an accessible interactive game by use of mouse or keystroke to assess relevant skills and abilities. 4, the process to request a reasonable accommodation and contact will be posted with instructions. So the applicant may inquire about the process and request a reasonable accommodation to make it easy to find. On the II front, more can be done to be accessible and inclusive. They're using it. And so we understand that in guidance, that it's important to really emphasize that reasonable accommodation and the process and the contact, and really focusing on the skills and abilities. While not ideal, as the process is evolving, that is a way to help the opportunity for there to be more accessibility. Also, there's a call for research within the NLP area to really look at sign language and the opportunity for that to be able to be interpreted with NLP. Wouldn't it be exciting to be able to offer that at one point? So it's critical for us to be able to think about the future and these future technologies, as well as being mindful of how within that design process, the accessibility can be incorporated with DEI as well as new technologies. Sue, would you like?
Sure. So how might you apply these ideas in your institutions? Are there strategies you could identify, statements like the accessibility statement, or policies or activities, teams that you think you might reform based on that second table we looked at that sort of embraced more types of individuals? And then we heard from the audience like different types of people with different types of disabilities, or you could say abilities. How can you inclusively enhance that statement or policy or activity? And what is a challenge or a barrier that you might consider fixing as we've just sort of taken you through an analysis, you might say? And is there one action that you'd take away from today to begin that process? And if so, did you want to raise your hand and we'll get the microphone to you? And you can see that you can always build on these. If you were making a list of the different types of people to include, you might think, oh, on any given day, you know who you'd like on your team to be representing the most diversity. But when you have a list, it kind of prompts you to say, oh yes, there's another person, there's another department. And then when you start reaching out across departments and considering all your roles, you start to have that cross collaboration that I think we're all interested in when it comes to inclusivity and accessibility.
It's also a conversation point in regards to these examples that hopefully you can see maybe some things in your organization, or you can help others and the DEI side and your organization see how they could be more inclusive within accessibility as well. So these are only starting points and small examples within the 40-minute time period we have to get us thinking and exploring at this point in time. Any questions? Are there any hands out there? Or if you could shout it out as well, if you want to, Mike.
We have one up here in the front. Oh, thank you.
So as a deafblind individual, I want to explain a few different things. How we tend to establish the different lists and categories of deafblind individuals.
Could you repeat that one more time?
Yes, give us a second, we're getting clarification. So you have to make sure that you get accommodations for the different types of identities and populations. Mm-hmm. The blind person sometimes, we figure out what they need. And sometimes we look at the central idea of like what a deaf individual needs or what a blind individual needs, and we think that by trying to match those individually that we actually accommodate both. But when you have the two disabilities together, then it actually leads to a new disability needing new accommodations, because now it combines them into one brand new disability as like its own group. Because there are people that are deaf-blind, and sometimes we are not necessarily being accommodated to because they're trying to accommodate either the deaf or the blind or both, but not together.
So I think what I'm hearing you talk about is the idea that sometimes people will design things specifically for the blind or specifically for the deaf or another population, and then it actually creates some challenges for others as well. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
So I think part of that point was sort of, we can list out many things, many types of individual needs and what makes someone unique, but there'll always be a different combination. There'll always be different things to pull together. So if you begin to get those working groups together, talking and communicating, then they can indeed embark upon, have we considered someone who's deaf and blind? Have we considered someone who processes cognitively in a very different way. So I think it does really take that teamwork to do that. And I believe that might have been part of your point as well.
So just to clarify, when somebody is deaf and blind, oftentimes the accommodation is made in combination, or the accommodation is made in combination by the accommodations that would have been given to a deaf individual and accommodations that would have been given to a blind individual, and putting those together. But what people don't understand is that when somebody is deaf and blind, it actually creates a new disability, that they are deaf-blind as one individual disability that requires new accommodations.
That requires some additional accommodations.
Of their
made
own,
there.
for their own classification of disability, correct?
Yeah, and based upon their own lived experiences as well, and the cultural experiences, that individuals who are deaf-blind are often not as included because there's a focus on the blind or the deaf, but there really should be a focus or inclusion of deaf-blind as well. Thank you for helping us understand that more fully as well.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. My name is Jennifer. I'm an instructional designer at a university. And one of the questions I want to ask is actually, are you planning to also share these PowerPoint slides? Because I think you have some really great examples and points that are valuable for someone like me who does trainings and presentations to expose instructors to this field and hopefully expose my entire university to this and share these kinds of conversations, because they're definitely happening, but I don't want them to miss the mark on the combination of DEI and accessibility together. So my hope is being able to share this globally a little bit more with my community itself.
Yes, we will be providing the slides through the conference presentation link after the conference is over. So please visit back to the description for the session today, and there will be a link there after the conference.
Thank you.
And I did want to mention that the reason I'm turning and looking behind me is I've actually found it difficult with a little bit of echo. Yeah. So to actually know what the questions were, I began to read the actual captioning, which is another example of how these things can be helpful to all of us. I also use that, by the way, sometimes just to focus on the process and what someone's saying. And I think we had one more.
Hi, my name is Kelly. I work for the State of Minnesota Department of Human Services, and I'm really glad for this presentation because my counterpart in DEI and I have really begun to kind of work together for our common goals and interests, and it's really been a great relationship. What I wanted to mention, and this kind of relates back to the conversation of deaf versus deaf-blind, one of the things that I've tried to think about is that you really have to have a lot of adaptability within your approach and your policy, because each person is their own individual, and we haven't really talked about intersectionality in this conversation yet, but everybody has their own experience, and a person with one disability might have experience that's completely different from a person with the same disability. And so it kind of goes into that conversation too around accessibility versus accommodations. You really have to look at what's gonna make the most sense for this individual in this given situation. So I just kind of wanted to add that. And I'm sorry, I had one more thing I was going to say and I completely forgot, so I'll stop, but thank you.
Well, thank you. And it's wonderful you brought up about intersectionality as well. And definitely, we do need to be thinking more inclusively in regards to disability, but also then culture, experience, knowledge, other areas that impact who we are and how we show up. And with that, we only had 40 minutes, and it's really hard to create a presentation within that. And so that's actually kind of presentation 2.0, right? And so we, if there is interest, then we are happy to talk about, further presentations, because there is so much more to talk about in this topic that we would have liked to have included as well. So thank you for sharing about, reminding us of that.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
We hope you have a good evening, and we'll be up here if you have any questions that you'd like to talk with us individually. As we said, we will have our presentations online after the conference. Thank you.